All right, 4.5, solve quadratic equations by finding square roots. So just some notation stuff here. If I have this square root of s, this is the radical. And this is the radicand. All right, so we're going to look at some properties of square roots. Okay, and this is assuming a is greater than 0 and b is greater than 0. Okay, so under a square root, we cannot have a negative. So we have these two properties. So the first one is the product property. And this says that the square root of b is equal to the square root of a times the square root of b. So if you're multiplying square roots, you can multiply what's inside of them. So basically, a little example. The square root of 9 times the square root of 2 is equal to the square root of 18, which is 9 times 2. Okay, which then could be simplified down into the square root, or 3 square root of 2, because the square root of 9 is 3. Okay, so that could also be broken down that way. The other option is the quotient property. So this is saying that the square root of a over b is equal to the square root of a over the square root of b. So example of this. The square root of 2 over 25 is equal to the square root of 2 over the square root of 25, which is equal to the square root of 2 over 5. And then for simplifying radicals, it is simplified if no radicand has a perfect square factor other than 1. So like the square root of 3 has no perfect square factor other than 1 and 3, so it would just that one it would be simplified. But like the square root of 9, you could do 3 times 3. That means that you could pull out a 3. So it would not be simplified if you had like the square root of 9. Okay, and 2, there's no radical in the denominator. So you can't have a radical in the denominator, and it still be true. Okay, you'd have to rationalize it, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Alright, so, rationalizing the denominator, so that's what I said we were getting ready to get into, so we'll do that now. Rationalizing is honestly pretty easy, and so we'll look at the form of the denominator and what we would need to multiply it by to rationalize it. And then we'll do examples of this in class because it will be easier to understand once you see examples rather than just what I'm talking about here. So, we're going to make a little table. So the form of the denominator and multiply the numerator and denominator by whatever's in this column. Okay, so we're going to have 3 different ones here. So if we have the square root of b in the denominator, we're going to multiply the whole thing by the square root of b, because then that'll give me on the bottom the square root of b times the square root of b, which is the square root of b squared. And so then the square root is going to cancel with the squared, and we'd just be left with a b on the bottom. Okay? If we had a plus the square root of b, we would multiply by a minus the square root of b. Okay, I'll show you why in just a minute. If I had a minus the square root of b, I would multiply by a plus the square root of b. So whatever sign's over here, you multiply it by the opposite one there. Okay, and I'll show you why in just a second. But just a little definition here for you. These that I've just bracketed off are called conjugates. And their products are always rational numbers. Okay, so the reason this is true, I'm going to show you one of them. Okay, well, technically in showing you one of them, I show you both of them because obviously they're just the reverse of each other. But if I were to have a plus the square root of b times a minus the square root of b, and I FOIL, that's going to give me a squared minus a square root of b plus a square root of b minus the square root of b squared, or just minus b squared. No, sorry. It's the square root, hold on, minus the square root of b squared. Squared and the square root cancel, so it's just b. So then this leaves me with a squared minus b. So that's what's going to be the product of those things multiplied together. Sorry, I was saying it wrong. So this is what you would get when you multiply that square root of b times square root of b. So then it would just become b. I think the rest of this we'll just do as examples. It's not really any other note things that we need to go over, so we'll do them in class on Monday.